The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has been working on an initiative called Engineering with Nature. It all started in 2010. And this is the EWN Podcast. EWN is developing and implementing nature-based solutions for water and infrastructure projects. It's bringing together a growing international community of scientists, engineers, and researchers from all kinds of disciplines that are committed to harnessing the power of nature to solve problems. The EWN Podcast tells their stories. Now here's your host, Sarah Thorne of Decision Partners.
Welcome to Season 6 of the Engineering with Nature podcast. I'm here with Jeff King, the new national lead of the Engineering with Nature program, and often my co-host. Welcome, Jeff. Can you believe that we're kicking off Season 6?
Well, Sarah, it is hard to believe that we are now in Season 6. It seems like just yesterday, you and I were back in the summer of 2020 exploring the idea of creating a podcast for EWN.
Absolutely. It was a good little science experiment that we thought we would just try. And here we are 3 years later. So in this trailer, we want to give our listeners a few hints about what's coming up in Season 6. But first of all, let's talk about some of the highlights of Season 5. It was quite a season.
Oh, that's so true. I just cannot believe the success that we have seen out of Season 5. A lot of big highlights to share with our listeners. When we kicked off Season 5, we had just over 24,000 downloads. And here, when we kicked off Season 6, we were at over 34,000 downloads. Unbelievable in terms of how high that number has increased in such a very short period of time. And we are thrilled that our listenership is growing so rapidly and that there is so much interest in engineering with nature.
It's absolutely phenomenal. And we have people that are tuning in from around the world. One of the things that's really neat is that when people come into the podcast, whatever episode they come into, they often go back and start listening to the podcast from Season 1. So we're thrilled. And the science experiment continues.
That's right. And just so much feedback, positive feedback coming in from our listeners. And everywhere I go, people want to talk about the podcast. And there are episodes that really, really mean a lot to people out there. And it's wonderful to hear so much being shared in terms of what an episode meant for somebody, what they learned from information from our guests, how it's impacting their life, and really conversations about, I never knew this, or I was really fascinated with how this was described. And so I know it's reaching a lot of people out there, and we want to continue to do that.
And we have had, to a person, fantastic guests, wouldn't you say?
I absolutely agree. And we'll have a chance, I think, today to just sort of recap what we went over in Season 5, and then also offer folks a little bit about what we think is going to happen for Season 6.
Well, without giving away the shop too much.
No, we can't do that.
No, we can't. Okay, so let's talk about our theme for Season 5 was realizing the value of nature. And we really set the stage for understanding the value of nature and nature-based solutions in our conversations with Todd Bridges, our recently retired lead of the Engineering with Nature program, but also Heather Tallis and Lydia Olander from the White House. And as our listeners will recall, Heather and Lydia were two of the three co-chairs of the report that was entitled Opportunities to Accelerate Nature-Based Solutions that went to the National Climate Task Force and was released by the White House on November 8th, 2022.
That's right. And really, my hat's off to Heather and Lydia for all of the wonderful work that they've been doing in this space. This administration has really leaned into the idea of using nature-based solutions and wanting to see that prioritized when we think about resilience. And so Heather and Lydia have both been leading the charge and doing some amazing work. And so with this report, it was groundbreaking, and I think it really has set the stage for federal agencies like the Corps of Engineers to actively consider nature-based solutions in all of their projects. And these were important conversations that we had with them, both in the season 5, episode 2, as well as episode 3. Heather came back and talked more about the National Nature Assessment with us in episode 3, and just really fascinating what they have planned for that National Nature Assessment, and really focused on how we value nature, and it resets how we think about projects, collaboration, and the benefits that can be delivered.
Absolutely. We're going to have to catch up with Heather on the assessment and see what she's learning.
Yeah, that's a great point.
And update our listeners on that, because she was just kicking that off when we talked to her. So after those 2 episodes, we had Todd back with Justin Aaronworth, who is the CEO of the Water Institute, and he was talking in episode 5 about measuring what matters. And you'll remember this show. They joined us shortly after the summit in Washington, D.C., to talk about how to measure the value of nature-based solutions in infrastructure. And boy, they were pretty pumped about the success of the summit.
Yeah, wow. It was great to be sitting in that audience and held at the National Academy for Science, Engineering, and Medicine. If memory serves, we had close to 900 people in attendance when you consider the people in the room as well as online. And really, by all accounts, a very, very successful summit. And I think back in all of the different sessions and panels and the fireside chats. And really, for me, that was an important podcast. And we have all the links back on that podcast to the National Academy of Science, Engineering, and Medicine to hear more. If people are interested in wanting to revisit some of those panels, they can listen to what was being discussed and actually hear more about the different topics that were covered. And I do that periodically myself, but really what came out of that was this idea of measuring benefits and the fact that this really does matter, and to be looking across all the different types of benefits that can be derived from projects. Not only engineering benefits, but also thinking about other social effects, the social benefits, as well as the environmental benefits, and being able to think about it holistically when it comes to projects, and ensuring that we're taking everything into consideration when it comes to approaches looking at benefits to cost ratios.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that we talked about a lot on the podcast that was a big outcome of the summit was the tremendous leadership and the commitment. And, it's one of the things that we've talked about many times on this podcast, that leadership, commitment, and focus is really the key to advancing engineering with nature and nature-based solutions. And that conference sure did it.
Yes, it did. I think from certainly where I was sitting, just seeing how many people were there that were representing their federal agencies. I mean, we had Rick Spinrad, the Undersecretary of NOAA, that was there in the room. We had representatives from the White House that were there on panels. We had Nicole LaBeouf, who was there from NOAA representing the National Ocean Service. We had leaders from all sectors, and also different leaders from levels of government that represented the state as well as different communities too. And to have all of those individuals there talking about the importance of nature-based solutions and why it mattered to them and what their constituents were looking for in the way of projects and innovation, it really did sort of start to galvanize this idea that nature-based solutions are here to stay.
It was powerful stuff. And speaking of powerful stuff, we also promised big names in season 5. And I have to say, I think we delivered.
Oh, absolutely, Sarah. And you did such a wonderful job interviewing all our guests. But I am particularly fond of the interview you did with Lieutenant General Spellmon for episode 6. And really had an opportunity to hear more about his vision of leadership, what innovation looks like internal to the Corps, and then also his view of partnership and how important that is to him as well as to the Corps of Engineers. And certainly thinking about the Corps from the standpoint of $90 billion in terms of projects that the Corps delivers, and really having a better sense of why partnership is so important. And thinking about thoughts, General Spellman's thoughts for the future, and certainly thinking about his priorities, that was all very inspirational.
He was a wonderful, wonderful guest, and I truly enjoyed having the opportunity to interview him. We had a fantastic conversation. I hope people will listen to it if they didn't get a chance to tune into episode 6. It was a good one.
That's right. It sure was.
I loved his comment on building the core of the future. And he said, we need to increase what he called the diversity of thought in the organization. And I think that's such an important perspective for all organizations. We need to think about diverse thinking and including all different points of view that we need to address the really complex challenges ahead, including climate change, which, as many of our season 5 guests said, it's upon us right now.
Yes, it is, Sarah. And I totally agree. And I think that, certainly General Spellman's vision is coming true. And with the conversations that I have internal to the Corps, and certainly wanting to have different viewpoints, perspectives, and insights, all informing decisions that are made, that becomes absolutely critical. And certainly we want to make sure that the public's voice is heard as well, and that their concerns, but also their interests and ideas are also being integrated into how we proceed with the projects that the Corps is responsible for.
Well, and getting down to working with the grassroots, working with the communities was very much the topic with one of our other visionary leaders who provided some very, very important perspectives.
Yes, Sarah, and I believe you're talking about Daniel Hayden.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the CEO of Restore America's Estuaries. And we had Daniel on for episode 8, and that was shortly after the Ray Summit that occurred in New Orleans back in December. And just a really terrific reflection on the importance of restoring and protecting coastal bays and estuaries. And Daniel has such a wonderful way of looking at things, and really he also provided deep insight in how engineering with nature and nature-based solutions play a critical role in the work that Ray does, and then also with all of their various organizations that they collaborate with. And of course, talking about visionary leaders, we can't forget Mike Beck. We had Mike, one of our good friends, on in episode 10. Had a chance to talk with him about building coastal resilience with nature, and also what does that intersection look like with the insurance industry. And Mike now is the director of the new Center for Coastal Climate Resilience at the University of California, Santa Cruz, and doing a wonderful job in that new role. And so excited that we're going to continue to have a chance to work with Mike now that also the University of California, Santa Cruz is a member of the Network for Engineering with Nature. So a lot more work will be happening with Mike and his team, and we're certainly excited about that. And thinking about how his work is significantly helping us to increase coastal resilience by combining innovative nature-based solutions with insurance incentives.
Yeah, I think our conversations with both Daniel and Mike were very thought-provoking. And I certainly, from my perspective, they deepened my understanding of the very real effects of climate change now, particularly on coastal communities, and the amazing work that's being done incorporating nature-based solutions at the community level. So they were both great shows. I loved having them both as guests, and they're two people we have to stay in touch with.
Yeah, I agree, Sarah.
And Jeff, we also did a couple of episodes that, well, in your words, they were where listeners could get their geek on.
Yeah, I can't believe I sort of teed that one up as part of
you did.
The opening for the season, but I did. And I hope there are those out there that do like to get their geek on like I do. So when it comes to research, I'm always just blown away by what people are doing, and just the incredible thought that goes into some of these research projects and how it really is advancing our understanding of nature-based solutions in so many wonderful and exciting new ways. We kicked off season 5 with a terrific episode on 3D printing of nature-based solutions. And this is some really leading edge work that's happening at the Army's Engineering Research and Development Center with some of my colleagues. And Burton Sudell was there, Al Kennedy was there, both from the Environmental Laboratory, as was Zach McClellan from the Geotechnical and Structures Lab. And they all did a wonderful job of offering our listeners more information about this exciting technology and what it means as we put this into practice, and to be able to create nature-based solutions in real time with these new innovative materials. And these materials, of course, mimic natural structures like coral and mangroves. So want to continue to see this evolve and have it be more commonplace as we look to create more resilience through use of natural infrastructure.
It's just fascinating work, and it has such tremendous potential. It's actually, I think it was probably our producer Dave Trafford's favorite show from season 5, because he talks about it all the time on his other shows. So he was getting his geek on, and I'm sure that we've had a lot of listeners tune into that one. So it's just really, really interesting. We'll keep our listeners apprised in season 6 of what these guys are doing with their 3D printing work. And we're also going to keep tabs on the really neat blue carbon research that we featured in episode 9.
Yes. So we certainly want to maintain our focus on carbon sequestration, blue carbon, and what that means for us. So much interesting work happening out there right now in this space. And we were very fortunate to have some of my colleagues on that could offer our listeners more information on what does this really mean, and what is the potential for blue carbon, for being able to sequester carbon, but also what we have in the way of natural sinks that already exist in the natural world. And so I think about Jacob Berkowitz and Lisa Chambers and Jenny Davis all doing some really exciting work in this space, and certainly want to maintain our connectivity with them to be able to have them back to offer more insight on the various levels of work and application that they are certainly doing right now.
Absolutely. So season 5 was a really big one for the Engineering Nature program in many ways. Important policy changes, groundbreaking research, really a new lens on the value of nature and nature-based solutions. And to cap it off, I'd say, well, maybe the end of an era and the beginning of a new one.
Well, that's true, Sarah. That's true. And now, we're going to be thinking about where do we go from here? And certainly we celebrated the retirement of a very close friend of ours and colleague, Dr. Todd Bridges. He retired at the end of February. And we did a special episode. It was episode 7, where we had Todd on, and he offered thoughts on what it was for him to be in this role for such a long period of time. And it was certainly inspirational. And he is definitely a visionary leader for engineering with nature.
Well, it was my pleasure to work with Todd for the past 15 years, including on the initial development of Engineering with Nature. And under Todd's leadership, Engineering with Nature was initiated in 2010 as, I think, a little project on the side of the desk. And now it's a global movement.
Yeah. That is so hard to believe. But, the good news here, Sarah, for us and certainly for everyone is that Todd's not going away. Anybody who knows Todd, they know that he's very, very passionate about this work and what's happening in this space. And he's committed to it. And so he's going to continue to follow his passion and inspire others. And he now has this new role through the University of Georgia, working with the Institute for Resilient Infrastructure Systems. And it's just so exciting to know that Todd's going to be leading in another way, certainly continuing to advance practice and help bring others to this space.
Oh, indeed. He'll do a great job at UGA. And boy, lucky students and lucky academic colleagues who are at UGA and also with the Network for Engineering with Nature who get to work with Todd, experience his passion, and learn about his perspective on the world and really the value he puts on nature and nature-based solutions. So it's an exciting time for him, and we sure wish him well.
Yes, we do. And I know he's already offered several different lectures over at the University of Georgia, and I think he recently attended another university where he offered a lecture as well. And my feedback is that those lectures are going extremely well, and the students all really appreciate hearing firsthand from Todd and his vision for where this can go.
Excellent. We can put some notes in our show notes about those and how people can get a hold of what's going on at the Network for Engineering and Nature as well.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
So, Jeff, we need to talk about Season 6, your vision for the Engineering and Nature program. In fact, that's going to be our first episode of Season 6. Don't want to give away the shop, but what kind of stories do you want to cover in the upcoming season?
Oh, Sarah, I don't even know where to start. I think that there's just so many wonderful topics that we want to continue to explore, and I really am excited about the thought of having a new season tee up where we can really have a lot of diverse topics that we cover, and certainly thinking about how we might want to define this upcoming year for engineering with nature. And my thought there is that we've gone up. So what do we think about maybe expanding the lattice of engineering with nature? As an analogy, the expanding lattice really starts to make sense in terms of engineering with nature when I think about building out all of the elements that support and enable expansion of things like nature-based solutions. And we're not talking about a lattice where perhaps plants are able to cling on to it and grow, although that does sort of have a context for engineering with nature. But from where I sit, thinking about a lattice for engineering with nature and extending that lattice, I'm thinking about something like a crystal and all the facets of a crystal, and thinking about the three-dimensional nature, the geomorphic kind of layout and dimension of a crystal, and what does that mean in the context of engineering with nature and all the different facets that entails, the people, the policies, the research, the landscapes, all of that intertwined in a way that creates this larger feature that is engineering with nature. And so we'll explore that a little bit as we go forward with Season 6. And as a function of that, of course, we're talking about the scientists, the engineers, the landscape architects, leaders in government, folks in industry, representatives of First Nations. We want to hear from them. We want them to tell us a lot more about what's happening from where they sit. What do they see? What are the opportunities? What does it mean for engineering with nature? We'll also continue to think about and discuss the value of nature. Certainly climate change figures into that. Also the integration of nature-based solutions, and offering our listeners more information about a variety of projects that exist in all types of different ecoregions. That's something else that I've been thinking about and certainly want to be able to share with our listeners. So in addition to that, of course, we'll have some surprises along the way. We want to be able to surprise our listeners and offer some guests that perhaps they weren't expecting. Leaders, scientists doing some really cool work around the world. And then also, of course, we would want to look at policy as well, which is also changing very, very rapidly in this space, and all for the good, I might add. So really exciting to think about Season 6 right now, and certainly we'll offer more information about that as we go along.
I think our lineup is coming together really well. I'm really excited too, Jeff. And I really look forward to talking with you about your passion and your vision for engineering with nature. It's just the perfect way to launch the new season.
Yes, Sarah.
Season 6, you promise you'll come back.
Oh, I'll be around, that's for sure. And I know you and I will be having many, many more discussions, and I'm so looking forward to it, Sarah.
My favorite guest. Okay, Season 6 kicks off with Episode 1 on June 14th. We hope you'll tune in.
The EWN podcast was developed by Sarah Thorne and Jeff King, Deputy National Lead, Engineering with Nature Initiative, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. For more information, you can visit our website, engineeringwithnature.org. The The EWN podcast is produced by Eye Contact Productions for the Engineering with Nature program within the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. I'm Dave Trafford.